On the morning of June 28, 1914, the sun rose gently over the city of Sarajevo. The streets were alive with excitement. Flags waved from balconies. Crowds lined the roads, hoping to catch a glimpse of royalty. A powerful empire was visiting, and people believed it would be just another formal day of speeches and handshakes. But history has a strange way of hiding its biggest storms inside ordinary moments. A single car moved slowly through the streets. Inside sat Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and his wife Sophie. They smiled politely at the people watching them pass. No one knew that within hours, their names would echo through history books forever. And no one could have imagined that one simple wrong turn, just a small mistake by a driver, would push the entire world into flames. What happened that day did not just end 2 lives, it shattered peace across continents. It pulled nations into a war so brutal that millions would never return home. Families would break, empires would collapse, the world would change forever. But to understand how one wrong turn sparked World War I, we have to go back to the tension that was already boiling beneath the surface. In the early 1900s, Europe was not peaceful. It looked calm on the outside, but underneath, anger and ambition were growing fast. Massive empires controlled huge parts of the continent. The Austro-Hungarian Empire ruled over many different ethnic groups, including people who did not feel connected to Vienna at all. One of those places was Bosnia and Herzegovina. In 1908, Austria-Hungary officially took control of Bosnia. Many Bosnian Serbs were furious. They felt they belonged culturally to Serbia, a small but proud neighboring country. Serbia dreamed of uniting all Slavic people into one nation. To them, Austria-Hungary was an oppressor standing in the way of that dream. And when people feel their identity is being stolen, emotions grow dangerous. Secret nationalist groups began forming. Among them was a radical organization known as the Black Hand. Its members were young, passionate, and willing to die for their cause. They believed violence was the only way to break free from imperial control. Their goal was simple but extreme: remove Austro-Hungarian power from Slavic lands by any means necessary. Meanwhile, Europe's biggest powers were building alliances. Germany stood closely with Austria-Hungary. Russia supported Serbia. France backed Russia. Britain watched carefully, ready to protect its own interests. It was like a room filled with gasoline fumes. All it needed was one spark. That spark came in the form of a royal visit. Archduke Franz Ferdinand announced he would travel to Sarajevo in June 1914. To Austria-Hungary, it was a routine political appearance. But to Serbian nationalists, it felt like an insult. The heir to the throne visiting a land filled with anger? To them, it was a symbol of control and an opportunity. Young conspirators, including a 19-year-old named Gavrilo Princip, were ready to act. They were inexperienced but determined. They positioned themselves along the route the Archduke's motorcade would take through the city. Their plan was deadly. Several assassins would stand at different points along the road. If one failed, the next would strike. Each carried a bomb, a pistol, and even cyanide to take their own lives after completing the mission. They did not want to be captured. They wanted to become martyrs. The morning began with tension in the air. The motorcade moved through the streets. The first assassin lost his nerve. The second hesitated. Fear can freeze even the most determined heart. But then came the third man. He threw a bomb at the Archduke's car. In a twist of fate, the bomb bounced off the folded roof and exploded under the car behind them. The Archduke survived. Several officers were injured. Chaos erupted. The attacker swallowed a cyanide pill and jumped into the nearby river, only to discover the pill was expired and the river was shallow. He was arrested immediately. It seemed like the plan had failed. The Archduke was shaken but alive. After attending a reception at the city hall, he insisted on visiting the wounded officers in the hospital. His schedule changed suddenly. Security tightened. Everyone believed the worst was over. But here's the twist. The driver of the Archduke's car had not been properly informed about the new route. As the motorcade moved again, the driver followed the original path towards the city museum. Suddenly, an officer shouted that they were going the wrong way. The driver stopped and began reversing the car, slowly. And by pure coincidence,
That stop happened directly in front of Gavrilo Princip. Princip had been wandering the streets, disappointed that the earlier attempt failed. He never expected another chance. But there it was. The car was only feet away. The target was sitting still. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and fired 2 shots. One bullet struck the Archduke in the neck. The other hit his wife in the abdomen. Within minutes, both were dead. In that quiet Sarajevo street, history shifted. Austria-Hungary was furious. They blamed Serbia for supporting terrorism. Within weeks, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia mobilized to defend Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia. France joined in. Germany invaded Belgium, pulling Britain into the conflict. Like falling dominoes, the alliances dragged country after country into battle. What nobody expected was that this regional conflict would explode into a global war. Soldiers marched off believing they would be home by Christmas. Instead, they faced trench warfare, poison gas, machine guns, and unimaginable suffering. The Western Front became a nightmare of mud and blood. The Eastern Front stretched endlessly. The Ottoman Empire joined the fight. Colonies around the world were pulled into the chaos.
By the time the United States entered the war in 1917, millions had already died. When the guns finally fell silent on November 11, 1918, over 16 million people were dead. Entire cities were destroyed. Economies collapsed. Empires vanished, including the Austro-Hungarian Empire itself. All because of a wrong turn. It sounds almost impossible. How can something so small cause something so massive? But the truth is, the world was already fragile. Nationalism, militarism, imperial rivalries, and tangled alliances had created a ticking bomb. The assassination was simply the match that lit it. Still, imagine if that driver had not made that mistake. Imagine if the car had continued safely toward the hospital. Gavrilo Princip would have remained just another angry young man in history. The Archduke might have lived to take the throne. Some historians believe he actually supported reforms that could have eased ethnic tensions within the empire. Maybe the war would have happened anyway. Maybe it was inevitable. But on that street corner in Sarajevo, it didn't feel inevitable. It felt random, accidental, tragic. The emotional impact was devastating. Sophie, the Archduke's wife, had always lived in the shadow of royal politics. Their marriage was controversial because she was not considered royal enough, yet they loved each other deeply. In their final moments, witnesses say the Archduke cried out, "Sophie, don't die. Stay alive for our children." Those children would grow up without parents. Across Europe, mothers lost sons. Wives lost husbands. A whole generation of young men disappeared into trenches and never came back. The psychological scars lasted long after the war ended. Entire societies were filled with grief. And the peace treaty that followed, the Treaty of Versailles, punished Germany so harshly that it planted the seeds for another, even more devastating conflict, World War II. So in a painful way, that wrong turn did not just start one war, it helped shape the entire 20th century. It led to revolutions, it redrew maps, it created new countries, it destroyed old ones. It changed technology, politics, and even how wars were fought forever. All from a moment that lasted only seconds. When we look back at history, we often imagine it being shaped by powerful leaders making huge decisions in grand rooms. But sometimes history changes because of confusion, miscommunication, and a driver who didn't get the updated route. One small human mistake. That is what makes this story so haunting. It reminds us how fragile peace really is, how quickly anger can spread, how easily pride and alliances can turn disagreement into disaster. A single shotgun in a quiet city became the echo that shook the world. And even today, more than a century later, we still feel the consequences of that day. Borders drawn after World War I still influence conflicts. Political tensions rooted in that era still shape international relations. All because a car took a wrong turn. History does not always explode loudly at first. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it looks like an ordinary day, with waving crowds and smiling faces.
until it doesn't. Until one small moment changes everything. And that is the chilling truth behind how one wrong turn sparked World War I, a reminder that in a world already filled with tension, even the smallest spark can set it on fire.